Here we are with step 6 of vocal editing. We just finished fixing sibilants, and so now we are moving on to fixing loud plosives. So plosives are basically the noise that we get when we don't use a pop filter. It sounds something like this. Pleasant. Boom. And this is what it sounds like when we use a pop filter. Pleasant. Boom. You'll notice that that explosion of sound that happens when you say B's and P's and sometimes even T's a little bit without a pop filter is really obnoxious, and it throws a huge amount of air right into the microphone that causes it to obviously react and sometimes overmodulate, where you get some actual distortion that happens in the process as well. So the first way to fix plosives is to not allow them to happen in the first place by using a pop filter. That being said, I realize sometimes you just got to deal with what you have, and so we need some way of trying to fix them when they happen. Now, my audio doesn't actually have any major plosive problems because I used a pop filter. So I went back and re-recorded one line with a particularly obnoxious amount of plosive happening. So here's the original line. We know the outcome will be. That will be line is a potential spot where you would get a plosive because of the B sound. So I re-recorded some versions of that, and it sounds like this. Will be. That's pretty awful. And here's an even worse version. Will be. You'll notice there's even more than plosive happening there. There's just all kinds of air going in there and just causing all kinds of distortion in the microphone. Will be. Now, I will say Logic is somewhat limited in terms of what it can do for fixing plosives. The ideal solution is that there are actual plugins out there that you can buy that do a really good job of fixing this sort of thing. That being said, if we only have Logic we're working with, then we need some way of dealing with this problem. So I'm going to take 2 here. Will be. I'm going to go ahead and just export it off to a new track. I'm going to mute the original version of this as well. That's Control M to mute a single region. And so then put together, we get this. You know the outcome will be just. Yeah, it's really pretty awful, right? So there's several ways that we could go about fixing this. Now, for now, let's just ignore the channel EQ on here. I was just trying to do just a minimal amount of trying to get these two microphones to match a little bit better because this take was just way bassier than this one. But either way, there's lots of ways to approach this. The most simple, straightforward way of handling it would be to go over to a channel EQ and just simply turning on the low cut or the high pass filter and turning it up to anywhere from around 60, 80, 100, even all the way up to maybe 150 hertz or so, and just flat out cut out the low end for that particular word. Now you'll notice over here, I actually kind of cut out where those words were happening. I like to, when I'm dealing with this sort of thing, I'll actually cut them out and move them to a separate track where it's kind of like my plosive fixing track. And that way I can kind of put a set of plugins that are going to more or less do the job for all of the plosives. And so you can just put a static, just kind of low cut on there, and we get this. You know the outcome will be just another 10. And it's already immediately a heck of a lot better. Now, the downside to this is that depending on how you get your settings going here, you may change the tone of the vocal too much to the point where it's just kind of cutting out too much bass overall. So you do have to be careful with that. A second option, I'm going to turn that guy off. A second option that I've had pretty good success with is under Dynamics, and it is the enveloper or enveloper, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And this is essentially a Dynamics plugin. What it does is it allows you to either increase or decrease the attack phase of a waveform, and then also do the same thing with the release phase when the audio kind of stops, essentially. So what we can do is we can take for our attack side of things, we can lower the gain on it and then spread out the amount of time that takes, and then also do a little bit of look ahead so that we kind of catch the plosive essentially before it actually happens. So let's just take a listen to this. You know the outcome will be... Here's without it. Let's scooch this up a little closer. Will be... Here's with it. Will be... Will be... Will be... And you'll notice it actually does a pretty good job of knocking down the plosive. And you can, work through different settings in here. You'll notice, like, if we turn the time way down, will be... It doesn't seem to do a very good job, right? Because we're essentially missing it. But if we slow down that attack time quite a bit, will be... Will be... Right? And then you got to be careful about going too far with this, because then you'll lose any of the actual kind of aggressiveness that you wanted in the vocal in the first place. Will be... And so you just got to kind of nudge this stuff around to try to find the sweet spot. The look ahead also will make a difference. You'll notice if you go too far with it, sometimes it goes too far ahead before it actually reacts. Will be. Whereas sometimes, somewhere around here might work. Will be. Will be. As with many things music production, particularly in the editing phase, it really just takes a lot of trial and error to try to get it right. So if we combine both our low cut or high pass filter along with our enveloper, we get, I'm going to be a little bit more gentle with this guy. We get something like this. Will be just another tantrum. And that's certainly better. Now you'll notice it's not really doing much to fix the distortion that's in the sound. There's just some nastiness that's happening in the actual waveform. Which is going to be really, really hard to fix with any of our just kind of stock plugins. What you could try doing is you could try actually removing a bit of the vocal. So I'm going to actually just take all of this stuff out here, and I don't know how well this is going to work. Now we're not going to leave that gaping hole right there. I'm just going to scooch this over and let it crossfade itself a little bit there. There we go. And let's just see what that sounds like. Will be. Yeah, and see we lost kind of the main part of the wheel. Maybe try a little bit of that. Crossfade that. Will be. It's actually a little bit better. Will be. You can kind of still hear that there's an edit happening there. But to me, that might be the sort of thing that when heard in the mix may be passable. I kind of look at when you're dealing with a plosive or some other major problem that really should have been fixed in the microphone, should have been fixed in the recording stage. You do the best that you can. So you kind of throw all these tools at it and see which one is gonna fit the best, because ultimately we need to listen to this thing back in the mix, which, by the way, we're not really mixed yet, so the vocal is going to be pretty quiet in comparison. But even if I put a little bit of gain on this thing afterwards, it might actually be passable. Will be. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a heck of a lot better if we compare that to the original version of this. And let's actually gain this guy up too so we can hear the difference. I think I put about 10 dBs on there. Will be. Will be. Oh, that's ugly sounding. Will be. Now compare that to our fixed version. Will be just another. I mean, it really is pretty substantially better. So, like I said, you kind of do what you can with what you have. And then I'll just briefly mention a third plugin that may or may not work. Again, depending on the very specific problem you're dealing with. But that is also under Dynamics, the multipressor, which is essentially just a compressor, a whole bunch of compressors that are filtered, right? So we have 4 different bands here. This particular band here lives in the 160 hertz range and below. And what we can do is, instead of just having there be a single low cut on the whole thing, we can make it only do that pull down in volume in this range when it goes over a particular amount. And so on here, the way we handle that is, let's go ahead and actually solo this band so you can hear it. And we're going to solo the vocal as well. Will be. And I'm going to turn off these guys so we can hear that. Will be.
will be,
And I'm going to bypass the upper bands.
will be,
And then all we're going to do is we're going to take this threshold knob right here. I guess it's not a knob, it's a little tick.
will be,
And you can see when it pops over that, you'll see this pull down, and that means we're reducing the volume in that particular frequency range. If we want it to react a little bit more, where it's pulling things down a little more, we can go up here to the ratio and increase the ratio a little bit.
will be,
And if we pull the threshold down just a touch more too.
will be,
And then if we listen to that in context, unsoloed,
will be,
here's with that bypassed.
will be,
You can definitely hear more B sound kind of kicking through. Here's with it back on.
will be,
Right? And so that's, kind of like your third potential option. You also have some look ahead possibilities with this as well. But that's pretty much it in terms of removing plosives. And I'll just say it one more time. The best way to deal with plosives is to just not let them occur in the first place, which is just use a pop filter. Pretty please.